Hey all, the Southern Poverty Law Center released its Guide to the Alt-Right on Campus, what students need to know. And I thought I would do my guide to the SPLC Guide to the Alt-Right on Campus, what student needs to know, because I want to reward the attempt to do something productive, and it contains some very good ideas. It also contains enough that makes it look like it was written by stodgy old fogies that I feel like the certain corridors of the internet are just going to make mincemeat of this thing. And so I'm going to do what I do, which is take something okay and make it super awesome by kind of going through and pointing out the things it gets right, the things I think should be improved, and the stuff that just makes it seem kind of silly. I'm not going to focus too much on the kinds of silly because I'm sure that other videos and websites and Reddit, subreddits, blah, 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 meme, will do that very, very well. And I want to keep this video relatively short, but what it basically does is explains what the alt-right is for people who don't know and where it kind of came from, mostly Cole's Notes kind of thing, how the alt-right uses freedom of speech. Don't take my word for it. There's a whole menu here. And then some of the players, so to speak. I think it's a somewhat incomplete list, and I think it's giving certain groups too much credit. The first thing I want to address is this idea that alt-right equals white nationalism. And I can understand why the Southern Poverty Law Center believes this. However, in my experience, being trolled by the alt-right, I have not found that to be the case. I find that a lot of alt-righters don't really care terribly much about white nationalism. They're in it to thumb their nose at political correctness and just cause as much disturbing of the shits as they possibly can. And so I think this is something of a derivative description of the alt-right. While it does describe a certain type of alt-right member, it doesn't get the entire movement in. A lot of the people who identify as alt-right that I have had occasion to speak to have said very clearly they don't hate black people, they don't hate people who aren't white, they don't hate Jews, none of that stuff. They just want everybody to stop everything from taking so seriously. They're sick of political correctness. Now, is it possible for somebody to start this way and then get further and further indoctrinated into less good stuff? Yes. And I do see that happen. But to be so reductive as to call the alt-right just white nationalists and white supremacists, I don't think that does the insidious nuance of the movement justice. I think that to dismiss it just as a white nationalist movement does not understand why it grew and why it's built. It didn't become as popular as it has because a bunch of young white men woke up one day and said, I hate black people all of a sudden. It was more insidious in that. And I think in fairness to the Southern Poverty Law Center, there is no way to truly explain what the alt-right is succinctly. Ironically, the best source for it was that Breitbart article that they wrote. That was written by members of the alt-right, and so that's a perfectly decent definition of what they believe. It's the sunniest face you could put on it, but still, I think that captures, and this is the only time you will hear me referencing Breitbart as a source that I recommend. And no, I'm not going to link to it. Do the Google if you care that much. But yeah, that I think weakens what comes next. The fact that they are just white supremacists equal alt-right. Anybody who's had any sort of association with the alt-right, moves in the same circles as the alt-right, is going to be, it's not quite that. And my concern is that this will cause people who are in sort of the orbit of the alt-right and therefore vulnerable to being taken in by the alt-right to dismiss documents like this. And you have to be really, really careful not to marginalize or alienate precisely the people you're trying to keep on the light side, right? Like, the dork side is fine, the dark side is not good, the dork side is even worse. And in a lot of ways, the alt-right has a lot of similarities with the dork side. They hate each other, but I think they hate each other because they're so alike. These are a bunch of people who want easy answers to complex problems and want to be told that their relatively low status in life is not their fault. And there's some reasons for that. A lot of them are understandable human reasons. And I think if we don't actually start drilling down and understanding those reasons, we're not going to get very far. But that's not what this document is intended to do. So moving on. Why is the alt-right targeting campuses? I think for the purposes of this guide, this section is fine. I just want to say the alt-right isn't just targeting campuses. The alt-right is targeting anything it possibly can, as is the ctrl-left, or as I call it, the dork side. If there is a pop culture movement, if there is a medium popular with young people, if there is a TV network, a radio station, a swap meet in your local community, these hardline political groups are targeting them. College campuses are not alone in that. So yes, this is a campus guide. However, I just want to say, you know, part of the reason this is spraying all over the place is they tried to come after gaming, and for a while gamers got taken in, and then mostly went, no, this isn't cool, this isn't fun, so we don't want to deal with this. And so they moved on to greener pastures for various reasons. But the reason I think we're seeing this stuff on college campuses is because it is mainstreaming, not because colleges embrace diversity, tolerance, and social justice, nothing like that. It's there. It is a free speech platform, and they are using it. And here's the thing. Every group targets college campuses. Every single one. You go to a college campus, you'll see a student organization for everything under the sun. That's not a bad thing. And as you'll say, as you'll see, they've linked it to Donald Trump and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a more direct connection that there he is, Monsieur Bannon, or as I heard somebody call him on MSNBC, Senior Bannon. Again, they really focus on the white nationalist wing of the alt-right. There is more to it than that. But they do rightly put Steve Bannon sort of front and center in this ideology. And I think the coming out of the closet of Steve Bannon is a big part of the reason we're talking about the alt-right so much. Now, many of us in gaming had to deal with the alt-right for years, and so this is all old news. And so perhaps that's where my cynicism is coming from, is it's like, y'all just getting on this? Really? Really? But I'll move on. They talk about the freedom of speech issue in interesting terms. They talk about how the alt-right uses political correctness as a bludgeon. And I wouldn't have taken it in this regard. I would have been clearer. They do make the distinction, but I would have made a more stark distinction between political correctness and common decency. And unfortunately, the lines blur in ways that are very convenient to the alt-right and very inconvenient for the rest of us, in that who determines whether something is political correctness or just decency for other human beings? Well, it's in the eyes of the beholder. And other than the really cool Dungeons and Dragons monsters, every beholder has a different perspective. And, you know, it does rightly say that alt-right groups have the right to speak. Now, they sort of put a but on that. And I'm not going to dwell on it too much. I just want to call it out because if you're going through and reading it, I want you to sort of be prepared for it. This is the part I want to spend the most time on, the what to say, what to do. And I think the Southern Poverty Law Center is spot on when they say, do not give these alt-right groups and speakers and so on a spectacle. Meaning, don't counter-protest, don't attack them, don't shout down their talks, just leave them alone and let them do their thing. Because if they show up and they do their thing and nothing happens, it's no story. If there's protesters and it's really visual, and if there's a big crowd outside, or if there's a confrontation in the event, or heaven forbid, if violence breaks out, well, then it's newsworthy and the news jumps all over it because if it bleeds, it leads. And the one thing I will question where they say, while there's nothing wrong with peaceful student protests against a hateful ideology, it's best to draw attention to hope instead. Hold an alternative event away from the alt-right event. You're going to hold a protest away from the event. It's kind of a mixed message, and I get they're probably doing it for political reasons. But the truth is, yeah, in the case of the alt-right, there's everything wrong with a peaceful student protest against an alt-right function. That's what they want. That's what they're counting on, that the dork side, the control left, will show up and act stupid and create a moral equivalency in the eyes of third parties that makes it easier for the alt-right to seem legitimate. Moving on. Some of this stuff is it's deal with the alt-right before it arrives on campus. Why? If you seem afraid of certain speakers, then certain groups are going to book them to troll. The same with research the history and views. I think that's dangerous. I think that the Southern Poverty Law Center is really serious about educating people on what the alt-right actually is. It should do an in-depth page on its website, because if you tell people to research the alt-right, they're going to go to Google and you have no idea what the quality of information they're going to get. And so many of these sites seem absolutely neutral when in fact they're wings of either the alt-right or the control left. I don't like it when people say, do your research. Where? You know, it's very difficult to tell the difference between a clear lake and a toxic waste dump on the internet when it comes to information. This is the part, this section here, meet with campus groups targeted by the alt-right, enlist their support. Enlist their support for what? What's with the wartime language? But more than that, the part that gets me, I'll read the whole thing and see if you pick up on the part I did. This could include students of color groups, LGBT groups, and Muslim student associations. Ask if they will help raise awareness. Encourage individuals to tell their stories of being targeted. They can speak in public meetings, newspaper stories, video interviews, and online forums. A simple story can change hearts, creating the foundation for a wall against bigotry in the community. Did you catch the part that jumped out at me? Encourage individuals to tell their stories of being targeted. I think regular viewers of the channel know where I'm going to go with this. You know how Leanna feels about perpetual permanent victim status. Individuals of all sorts should be encouraged to tell their stories, period. Don't restrict a person to just telling stories of victimhood. They should be encouraged to tell stories of success as well. Nobody wants to go to a pity party. The food is crappy and the drinks are weak. Okay? Show up and have a celebration. And this is what happened. We didn't know what we were doing in my incredibly diverse high school. But we were actually setting the textbook for what works in my high school experience, because we didn't have these stand up to racism days because, well, the school was so multicultural There was a rumor that went around when I was in like grade 7 that my father was a racist. It was kind of true. But kids were trying to beat me up because of my father's beliefs. Being a racist was the worst thing you could possibly be in my school. So why the hell would we hold anti-racism rallies? That came with it, right? What we didn't have were role models for success. That's what marginalized groups of all kinds need. Nobody needed to tell a single kid in this impoverished neighborhood how hard it was to live their experience. What they needed was tangible tools of how to make things better. Not just be told it gets better, tangible ways to make things better. And one of my fondest memories of high school was during a multicultural assembly. We did an assembly once a year where everybody did dances or displays or art or readings or something like that from their culture. It could be anything they wanted. We did a goth act. One year we did Depeche Mode with the LGTB QXLMNOP students one year, and they're like, that's pretty cool, that was hardcore, but I remember this one group, they were doing classical Indian dance, and there was this one part, the chorus, the chorus was very catchy. It was a they did the move that was, what we call now, and I still feel uncomfortable saying this, the screwing on the light bulb, petting the dog. That part would go, and they go around in a circle. Well, this happened quite repetitively in this song. So by the third or the fourth time it happened, this group of like a dozen b-boys from like the third and fourth rows decided they were going to join in. And they got out their do-rags and they were spinning them around. And that's what we called them back then. Okay, don't freak out on me. That's what they were called. Some people say that's racist now, but that's what they were called. And they were spinning their bandanas and they were holding up their fat pants so they didn't fall down because they had the baggy jeans. And every time you just heard this, hey, from the third and fourth row, and they go around in a circle with the dancers. And by the fifth or sixth chorus, you saw the dancers, the women on stage start giggling because they knew it was coming, and then they'd be laughing and these guys were dancing. They didn't have a clue. These guys from Afro-Caribbean families, they didn't have a clue what the song was saying. They just knew that they had fun with something from another culture. No one was like, that's cultural appropriation. You should show more respect for someone's culture. They were showing respect through having fun. And the Southern Poverty Law Center has correctly identified that a big reason people flock to the alt-right is because of its irreverent humor. And this is something that the left is really falling behind on, because a lot of the humor on the left is so uptight, and basically the only thing you can make fun of is how stupid the right is. The minute you start making fun of censorship or people being too sensitive, which is what comics like the late George Carlin and Lenny Bruce and these left-wing pioneers of free speech used to do all the time. They used to look at what was stupid in their lives and make fun of it, and some of that was obscenity. George Carlin, I mean, the 7 words you can't say on television, he just rattled them off. Like, could you imagine doing this, something similar for modern day lefties? Trying to be irreverent in this culture? You can't. And that's why a lot of comedians are avoiding college campuses. Because you could have a black comic that goes and offends a feminist organization. You could have a Jewish comic that came and offended a Muslim group. You're going to offend someone, and it's just not worth the $1,500. And that, why did I come up with that number? Because I used to help book comics on college campuses. But the issue is that if you are not exposed and kind of see the humor in your situation, you are not going to be terribly effective advocating for that position. You have to be able to see the funny, because that means you're not too far down the rabbit hole and you still have some perspective that regular people can connect to. Nobody wants to go to school outside of school. They want to be entertained. And the left can complain all they want about the entertaining elements of the alt-right. But if these guys are really good entertainers, more power to them. And you know why they're attracting people? Because people are sick of the censorship. Not necessarily just the political correctness. The element of, I didn't like this, so instead of just not attending, I'm going to suggest you deserve to be fired. I'm going to go after your livelihood. I'm going to go after your family. I'm going to dox you. I'm going to scorch earth you. I'm going to do all these things. That's what people are sick of. And they see these alt-right groups that they've got memes and silliness and cartoon frogs and, you know, bears and whatever, penis monsters, and it seems like a party. And because there's nothing comparative on the left, because everybody takes themselves way too seriously, people go where the fun is. And you constantly hear, I don't agree with everything they say, but they're funny. And the problem on the left is you ain't allowed to be funny because then you may be problematic. And we know what problematic is, right? Piece of shit human. Oh, sorry, garbage human. Never mind that somebody is using humor to laugh at their own experience. If I want to make jokes about my own boobs, you have no right to call me problematic, but plenty of people think they do. If I want to make jokes about some of the experiences I have had in gaming, and I want to laugh at it instead of feeling oppressed, you don't have the right to say that I have internalized misogyny. Because nobody has come up and asked me what purpose the jokes serve for me. And the purpose that those jokes serve for me is that I am not going to let these people hurt me with their stupidity. I'm going to find a way to make fun of it and have fun with it, because then that shows other people that it's okay to laugh at the slings and arrows that life throws at you. And guess what? That's way cheaper than years and years and years of counseling, and it's a lot more effective. Now, you shouldn't be making fun of yourself. That's not healthy. And I notice a lot of these alt-right comics, between the lines, they are very unhappy, broken people, and no amount of fame, no amount of money, no amount of attention, and no amount of power will take that away. And I say this as somebody who has made the point to go and watch them speak in person if I can help it, to really get a sense. You really get a different sense of somebody when you're in the same room with them. I can't quite explain why it's different than video, but it is different. The camera's not telling you where to look. You can look at their hand position. You can look at whether they're tapping their foot under the table, certain things a camera can't catch. And it's funny because when I go down this list of who's who, we all know what happened with me and Milo-kun. You know, Richard Spencer, the reason Richard Spencer is a name is because he got punched. That's it. Nobody knew who he was before that. Let's just, let's just say what it is. And some of these other, the fact that, there's only 2 headliners for the alt-right, that's really interesting. Oh, it's this big movement with speakers that are coming on campus, and it's a scourge. 2 whole headlines. Now, I'm actually interested in this brain trust category that they talk about, because this is the part that I actually think needs more discussion about. And discussion does not mean you just dismiss everything because you're afraid of it. So if you agree to one point, it means everything else is valid. No. You can agree with one point someone says, but still think their overall message is either incoherent or flat out wrong. And you see some of these guys who are highly educated. And, you see the statistical and allegedly scientific underpinnings of some of these thoughts. And this is the stuff that we actually need to have a conversation with. And the Southern Poverty Law Center would do a lot of good breaking down the work of Jared Taylor and Stephen Bannon and Greg Johnson and David Horowitz. David Horowitz's story is uniquely tragic, but actually breaking them down and actually showing, it's one thing to say something is pseudoscience. It's another thing to actually break down and show in a dispassionate way where things go wrong. And it's harder than, I'll see your study with another study. You actually have to have a conversation about this, because people, I find people in general are fairly open to something that sounds like it makes sense to them. And if you throw a lot of opaque blah, 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 blah at them, they're going to tune out and go for the thing that seems common sense. And so if you actually take the whole of an argument and acknowledge when the other side, for lack of a better term, has a point, that makes your argument stronger, because you're showing, I will give you this, this, and this. However, that does not negate the much stronger arguments here, here, and here. That is a truly intellectual discussion. And that's not what's going on in these ideological silos that we're navigating in this day and age. But this is when this document gets really crazy, and this is the point where everybody should kind of be going, yikes, and you know, this should kind of say it all. Whoa. Like, this is kind of undeniably, you know, this is the kind of stuff that I don't really see the problem there. But, you know, pictures like this is all you really got to say. Like, do you really want to take the word of a guy who thinks that there are photos of them that exist there? Unless he's waving hi to his auntie and just, they caught him at the wrong time. Yikers. You don't have to say more than that, okay? And, it's funny because we had issues, we had a thing with the Proud Boys in Canada recently, and it turned out they were all Navy. Whoops. And, you know, these groups, the thing that this document, and I don't want to sit on a disturbing image, so I'm going to go back. The thing that this document fails to factor in is that people are looking to belong. And the thing I think is missing here, and I already went on at length about keep it fun. Have a fun party. Have an event that people want to go to where all are welcome. That's critical. Because the thing that this guide does not really get into is how much similarity there is between why young white men join alt-right groups and why young men of other races join gangs. And I don't want to say just young black men or young Latino men, because there are Filipino gangs and up here Tamil gangs and things like that. There are different gangs. This is the same dynamic as joining a gang. And we know the things that push people into gangs. A perceived lack of other options and no mentorship. And so if we can provide those gaps, those things that these young men are looking for, that's how you really solve the issue. But that means that the left has to stop these no white people allowed things, or you can come but not speak. We have to find a more inclusive way of doing things. Because if somebody is flat out told, you are not welcome here, they will go where they are welcome, even though they find certain views repugnant. Especially extroverted people who need that social contact. I'm super lucky that I'm incredibly introverted, so I can spend days and days alone and be just hunky-dory. This is a serious thing. And we can condemn bad things all we want. But if we're not if we're not giving good ideas the fertilizer and soil and water and light to grow, then all we end up with is a barren wasteland. We end up with a scorched earth. And I've heard so much this week about the right things to condemn. We want to hear people condemning. Who in their right mind doesn't condemn white supremacy? I don't know of anybody who doesn't condemn white supremacy. You know why? Because if people think white supremacy is good, I don't associate with them anymore. That's not the issue. The issue is these people, and we know there's a lot of young men out there of all races, of all cisgender, transgender, gay, straight, somewhere in between on all counts. We know that there are a lot of people looking for a community. And a lot of people don't want to join a community that's based on what a community opposes, but they will join it if they have no other options. So what we have to do is give people a place they can come home to. We need the equivalent of what we did with those multicultural assemblies back in high school, where everybody just had fun in their own way together to the same piece of music without judgment. And oh God, it's that without judgment part that the left really needs help with. I know you mean well with your problematic, but what you don't realize is the average person, when you start constantly saying a view is problematic, they feel judged by you. And if you jump on them and label them problematic or worse, I'm just saying that because you guys know I love to joke about the word problematic, because it's a 5-syllable word or 4-syllable word where a 2-syllable word could be used. And if that's the height of just faux intelligentsia, either something's a problem or it's not. If it's not a problem, leave it be. If it is a problem, deal with it. You don't need problematic. Is it the problematic bubble like in a board game? Like, come on. Here I go with the jokes, but people need to be able to finish their thoughts, and people need to be able to clarify things without being jumped on. And so if you really care about the polarization and politicization of modern culture, it starts with you. Listen before you talk and give people a chance to finish their thoughts. Ask no fewer than 4 questions regarding an idea that you object to before you jump on someone. And there should be, what do you actually mean by that? Followed by, it's coming across like blank. Is that what you meant? And give them a chance to say no. And then have a dialogue. It is way more effective than just jumping on someone. And that doesn't mean you feed the trolls, right? But it's amazing to me how many people use trolling as protection. But they actually are curious about this stuff. They just don't know how to do it in an unironic way. And so that's my thought about it. I think it's a good start. And I'll give the Southern Poverty Law Center real credit for taking the first step. I think what is needed now is a suggestion guide for events that are not dreary and miserable and full of pain. And this document doesn't provide that. It doesn't provide well-sourced resources for people, but that's work that can be built on. And maybe somebody watching this video can, pick it up there on college campuses or something. Like, let people have fun. The brain needs breaks. You need a break from caring so awful much about everything, okay? It's very important to just be a human being around other human beings. Everything does not have to have a point. And if you allow yourself to sort of soak in your own humanity, you become much less judgmental of others. All right, thanks for watching. Patreon support is extremely important. I greatly support any support you can give on a monthly basis, even if it's just $1. It keeps allowing me to do content like this, not directly connected to Lady Bits. Thanks for watching. See ya.